So, welcome to Tell Me in 10. Today, I am joined by Mark Ryan. I know you said Mike there, but Mark Ryan, who is the senior pastor at BCC in Birmingham. So, Mark, hello, welcome to this interview.
Yeah, good to see you. Great to be with you.
Thank you. And so, Mark, before we go into the 10 questions that we use with all of our guests, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I've been in Elam nearly a quarter of a century now, which is a short time for many long-termers. And I pastor the Letchworth Elam Church, which is now called Letchworth Garden City Church. And I'm currently pastor of Birmingham City Church, as you mentioned. Yeah. And I've got, obviously, Kathy and I have been married for 42 years. Fantastic. And we've got two daughters, Lydia and Leah. Lydia is a banker in the city in London, and has actually just worked out the money to provide the money for the Nightingale Hospital for some of that. Yeah. So that's a cool role for her. And Leah works in a church in Nottingham, and they're married to Andy, who's a children's worker there, and Lydia's married to Sam, who's also a banker. And we've got three grandchildren, Olivia and Ben and Roman.
Ah, fantastic. So we're going to jump straight into the questions here. So Mark, how did you become a Christian? What was your journey to faith? Were you born into a Christian family, or?
Yeah. No, my journey to faith was one of these night and day experiences. Grew up, didn't know anything at all, completely non-Christian, totally secular, and actually it was through an RE teacher at school. Okay. So I was saved through school's work and through a Christian teacher, and just came to faith over doing CSE RE. And in those days we studied the book of Luke, and through that journey through the book of Luke and his influence, I went to his little church and gave my life to Christ there.
Fantastic. So how old, roughly, can you remember how old you were? 14.
But I didn't know anything about faith at all. I didn't know, I knew Jesus had died on the cross, didn't know about the resurrection. And when they told me Jesus was coming again, that blew my mind, so I was completely unschooled, as it were.
So what kind of denomination was that you started to attend?
It was a classic Pentecostal denomination. In this country, it's called the New Testament Church of God, which is largely a Caribbean church. And so you can imagine with my colouring, I stood out just a little bit. But as far as that, they were just lovely people and always felt welcome. But, as I journeyed on, felt like coming to Elam was a better fit for me and a better home.
Excellent. So moving on to our second question, when did you realise that you were going to be called? Well, when did you realise you were called to ministry?
I think quite early on. I kind of had, one of the big things for me about becoming a Christian was the sense of purpose. And of course, I obviously felt convicted about sin and, know that I was completely away from God, but very quickly felt this sense of that life had a purpose. Okay. And therefore, I began seeking that, and I guess that's a teenage thing anyway, began seeking that quite early. And I was training to be a school teacher at one time, and thought, when I was in the classroom, I thought, no, I don't think I could do this for the rest of my life. And so really that calling became stronger and stronger and stronger, thinking this is what I've got to do. So really quite early on.
Excellent. Cool. And so how did that, just to follow up on that, did you kind of speak to your pastor at the time? How did that kind of move forward in that call?
Well, I've got a really strange calling story. And it's quite boring, but was dramatic to me.
Okay.
when I really felt like I was called, I was filling in a survey,
Okay.
and question 7 got me.
All right.
And it was a really strange experience because my pastor gave out this survey, and it was, I think the first 4 questions were name, address, phone number thing. So, and then it was kind of, question 7 was, do you feel called to Christian service? Yes, no. Well, in those days, I mean, now we teach that we're all in Christian service. Being like I just said about being a school teacher wasn't for me. But we know that's a brilliant ministry. It's actually a ministry for people. But in those days, it was more taught that you were a minister or you were in secular work, and that the ministry was this calling. And there are advantages and disadvantages to that teaching. But anyway, as when we came to question 7, which was, do you feel called to quit Christian service? Yes, no. I'd never really thought of that before. So I, with my pen, hovered over the no box, and my hand began to shake, and I couldn't put the pen down on no. And when I moved it over to yes, I could put the pen down. So I moved my hand back, and my hand began to shake again.
Gosh.
I couldn't put my hand down.
Yeah.
So I went to yes, and I did that 3 times. And actually, that's how I felt first called, was through a survey. So I think I've got the most boring calling, story of,
I think
and couldn't check the no box. So that was my first realization.
Fantastic. Oh, excellent.
It's weird, isn't it?
It is, and God moves in mysterious ways, and through a yes no box on a form. That's how it happens.
That was it.
That's good.
So it's kind of like, okay, I'll carry on from here. And actually, my realization was, I guess I must be called then. And it really was like that. I was very, very unschooled, a really raw person.
No, it's good. Good to hear a different way of God calling somebody to ministry. So our third question is, do you have a favourite book of the Bible? And if so, why would it be?
Actually, obviously I read the question before, and I mentioned this in a message that I've just done for India, that I don't really have a favourite book of the Bible, because as a minister, you tend to get inspired at different seasons. I guess if I was really pushed on it, I think the book of Ephesians, Paul, what F.F. Bruce calls it, the queen of all epistles, and it's so well-rounded in theology and also practice. So I go back to that for reference. But obviously the life of David is great inspiration, because I did a 14-week series one time on Jonathan, and got to the end of this series and felt like God said, yeah, but you're a David. So I just thought, oh man, this is crazy. So I do resonate with the stories of David a little bit.
Excellent. And so can you tell us, you hinted at it at the start, what you've done in ministry and where you find yourself now at this moment in time?
I mean, early on, I pioneered churches, and I planted 3 churches, and of which all have survived in some sort of way. And so that's great. And I found that difficult. However, why I was asked to be the pastor of something called a Christian Servicemen Center, which was an American military church. It was in the denomination that I was in at that time. And when I pastored and just ran church, I found that I led more people to Christ than when I was evangelizing and trying to plant. And so it was a real journey towards gifting, really, of church leadership, as opposed to, I was always just wanting to evangelize. And so in the late 80s, I ran a strange church, really, called the Christian Servicemen Center, which meant that the military people would come in They'd be there for a few years, and then they would what's called PCS, or rotate out.
Yeah.
And so my congregation was leaving all the time.
Yeah.
And so we had to keep winning people. And that really set the tone in my ministry of, well, if you don't do anything, this is going down anyway. So we better keep doing things and, reaching out. So I did that for 4 years. And then early 90s, went and did I'd been to Bible college beforehand, but then I went and did my master's degree in the United States. And when I came back, I was I had a really strange ministry assignment. I got caught up when I was doing my master's degree of doing team ministry, which we all are. And so I wanted to be part of a team. So I didn't come back in a senior position. I was a youth leader, but also what's called a care pastor, which was bizarre because I spent time with young people and also went to tea dances with older people as well, because I was the care pastor.
Yeah.
So, and I did that for 4 years in the Hitchin area near Stevenage, Luton. And during that time, I kind of became aware that I was more of a wanting to pastor my own church. I don't think I was that good of an assistant in that sense. I think I worked hard, did my best, but really came to the realization that leading a team was probably more my gifting. So then through Wyn Lewis and my pastor's friendship with him, I was in a strange way offered the Letchworth Elam Church to take on, which had probably been through a bit of a difficult time. And Alan West at Luton, I was going to work with him as the youth leader there, but Alan, through a bizarre phone call we had, saw the sign of what was then called Church on the Way and said, what if the elders asked you to come there? And they had done. And that was a confirmation that, I should go there. So that was a really strange thing. And so I was in Letchworth for about 12 years, and the church moved, transitioned buildings and so on. And then, but all this time, I'd always felt called to a city.
Okay.
And never made any secret of that. Talked to David Campbell, talked to other people and said, at some point, I think my ministry will end up in a city. And so much so that Kathy and I went on city breaks for holidays and so on. I was driving her nuts. And so I had a strange experience again of seeing Birmingham from the air. I don't really talk about it too much unless we're in a more of a seminar setting or a ministry setting. And then just really felt called to Birmingham. And then unusually, at that time, when it was called Birmingham Christian Centre, became vacant, and I was asked to do that. And I've just really felt that the urban inner city ministry is kind of where I'm at, really.
And so how long have you been at BCC now?
Again, I think it's 11 and a bit years.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, not quite as long as Letchworth yet.
No, but and through those years, how have you seen it change? What would you say has been the biggest thing in those 11 years you've been there?
I think BCC's become a much more multicultural church, which is our heart. I think it's become more of a city church of welcoming everybody.
Yeah.
I think that we had an excellent team when I got there, and their callings have gone in different directions. But now I've really enjoyed building a stable team.
Yeah.
And I think the church has progressed not only in its evangelism, but also in its attitude towards stewardship and generosity.
Yeah.
Which
and you have I think you have a stewardship pastor, don't you? Just with like
discipleship and stewardship are kind of very linked in our church. Yeah,
excellent. So, who outside of Jesus has influenced you the most in your ministry?
I found this when I read this. This is a hard question. I think you have different seasons with different people. uh, and I think, I think in our generation, we were all influenced by Willow Creek, and we have to say Bill Hybels
Yeah.
and Rick Warren as kind of faraway mentors.
Yeah.
That hit us all like a wave. In our generation, we were reacting against the hyper faith teachers. And when Warren and Hybels came along, they added a stability to the church that was helpful.
Yeah.
And I guess in the same way as that today's generation relate to Craig Bichelle and probably Andy Stanley.
Yeah.
I think personally, there are some people who in your early ministry, there's an American holiness preacher called Dolus Messer that taught me that teaching the Bible was enough, that you didn't have to always look outside of that. And he was an excellent Bible teacher. I think in latter years, I think it's your more than friends, but ministry partners that shape you as well. I was in a strong accountability group, and obviously, Dave Ayling was a massive influence on my life. And I'm still, that's still, I don't quite know what to do with Dave's loss at the minute.
Yeah.
That's still too much to process. But so I think our journey partners have also been a big influence, where you get to talk things out. And I would really encourage everybody to have that, at some point. Yeah. I do think as well that one of the influences on my life has been Christian thinkers. And I don't want to sound cute saying that, I do think it's important to listen to voices that are different than you, and so on. So although I don't agree with some of what he said, or much of what he says, Seth Godwin has been interesting to listen to. Malcolm Gladwell, although he's secular, it's interesting to process things. And so I think some of the other guys are a bit much of a muchness, but I don't know whether I should say that publicly.
That's fair enough. No, and I think you're right there. I think I've experienced throughout my relatively short journey in ministry that at different times people have influenced me and have helped me along that way. So I think it is a tough question just to pick maybe one person.
Yeah, I think read. That's what I think about ministry is read widely and not just in your lane. That's important.
Absolutely. So outside of our current situation, we're recording this interview during the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. What is the most challenging aspect of your current role, or the most challenging thing in your current role?
I think we're all struggling a little bit with discipleship. I have two. In a city church, I think discipleship, you just have to keep knocking on it, that people are living the life, that they're consistent, being a witness, growing personally, and influencing their community and living the life of holiness. It's just a continual process that you just have to not lose heart about. That you just don't have to give up about, because people will delight you and disappoint you all the time. So we have to be up for the long-term journey of discipleship. And I think in a city church, I'm finding that finding community is always work. It doesn't just happen. You just have to create pathways of community, because people are commuting and living busy lives, and in other areas as well. But it's just a difficult thing to create now. It used to, like when I was in the Christian Servicemen Centre and also in the early days of Letchworth, it was very, very easy to gather community and leverage that. Today, I find that much harder with the pace of people's lives.
Yeah.
But even in our current crisis is teaching us different ways of doing community, isn't it? So that's
absolutely, yeah, definitely. And what is the most enjoyable thing you get to do in your current role?
Well, when we are out of this crisis, I mean, I have to say that our meetings are enjoyable.
And so that's the Sunday meeting.
Yeah, Sunday and some of our prayer Bible stuff. And I'm not saying that to say, oh, it's better than anybody else's. I'm just saying personally, I more enjoy that. I do like that. And I'm finding this time a sacrifice, being away from people, because I actually do enjoy being with the people in the church. I think the other enjoyable thing is developing team. And that's difficult and never just happens. So those two aspects for me are the most enjoyable, is actually the gatherings, and it's not just the worship thing, it's the testimonies about how people are doing out there. And sometimes I think, because we have kind of an attractional model, although I don't think it's quite that. Some people would just say, oh, you're just into the big gig. But it's not that. It's the coming together and sharing the stories as well as the songs. And then envisioning each other to go back out and find a new story. That's just a great thing for me.
Excellent. I know that's phenomenal. And the way, I've known you for a few years now, and I've seen you invest in team outside of BCC as well, which is fantastic. So I can definitely echo. I get your heart there. If you could go back in time to when you started out in ministry, if you had a time machine, what piece of advice would you give a younger Mark Ryan now?
I think I would say join Elam sooner. I wish I'd joined Elam sooner.
Okay.
I do. I guess that's a weird advice, but I think what I would say to myself is relax more and let what God is doing come to full fruition. Somebody once said to me when I was a young minister, Mark, you see a snake in the grass before it's raised its head. One of my gifts is I can perhaps see problems and scenarios before they become apparent.
Okay.
And so it's a good thing, Sometimes I can steer the church and think, oh, let's do that, because that will happen, that this happens, and then this happens. So let's guide it. And that's a good gift. But the downside of that is sometimes you need to let God play things out in people's lives more. And don't try and over-pastor people, or don't try and make it right for everybody. Sometimes people have got to go on their journey, and then you can more gently guide that. So I guess I'm saying don't jump in too quick. Be something that I would say to myself.
No, that's excellent bit of advice.
And I guess those people who know me will go, he still is doing
that. So moving on to our current situation, and with this pandemic, what challenges and opportunities do you see for the local church now?
I think the challenge is engagement. Meaningful engagement. Now, people are doing views and likes, and we're all counting that on our Facebook pages and so on. But once we've got over the initial, somebody watched us, we have to understand, well, how are they really engaging? So I'm working hard more on, two things: content, good content, but good engagement. Now, but the opportunity is that that we are learning different ways of connecting with people, and that's great. And also, I don't know whether this is just a hope or whether it's anecdotal at the minute. I am sure that non-Christians are getting a window onto some of our ideas through the internet, and that could be immense.
Yeah.
I think we'll be known by people much more than we think, and hopefully that will translate into real connection.
Yeah.
So engagement is a real challenge, but the other opportunity for church is that we can't babysit people, which I tend to have a kind of leaning towards that, and Christians are having to stand on their own 2 feet. I hope that people aren't just surfing and going from channel to channel to channel and just getting the latest Christian tidbit, but maybe they are learning now to say, okay, I'm going to do Bible study, I'm going to do resources from online, but I'm going to do it, and they're having to take their own responsibility. And actually, even though that might make some pastors or all of us feel a little bit insecure that we're not as needed as much as we thought, it's actually a really good thing for Christians to stand on their own 2 feet.
Yeah, excellent. So, final question from me is, when this is all over, do you think the Western Church, the church in the UK, is going to go back to the way it was before, doing things pre-pandemic?
I don't think so. I think, for instance, BCC now will always be an online church.
Mm-hmm.
We kind of knew it before. For instance, one of my elders said, Mark, I listened to your podcasts for a year before I came to the church because I wanted to check out your teaching.
Yeah.
So I think that we will always have an online presence now, and some churches will do that. So that and that's nothing new to some churches. Some churches will say, "Well, big deal," that we've been doing that anyway. I think my initial thoughts are, and it's hard to predict. Let me say something slightly controversial.
Go for it.
I feel a little bit let down by the prophetic side of the church.
Okay.
In that they are actually commentating a bit rather than prophesying.
Okay.
And I kind of think, let's hold off and reflect about what God's doing. And the only inkling I have is that John 15 says that any branch that bears much fruit will go through a pruning.
Mm.
So I think we'll be surprised who perhaps doesn't come back. And I think we'll be surprised who does come back and what flourishes.
Yeah.
So for afterwards, I think what I'm reflective about is where the new growth will be.
Yeah.
And not propping up old systems that probably weren't working anyway.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at.
Yeah. So maybe a kind of an opportunity to stop doing some of those things that we were doing before. Yeah. And this will be a natural break for some of them.
Yeah, I think Mark Pugh says it well, that he says that I think God's pressed the reset button.
Yeah.
And I think there'll be a reset. And some of the things we'll say, we're never going back to that. We're not doing that anymore. But we are doing this new opportunity.
No.
And I think the other side of thing as well is that Christians will have, actually, I know we're all locked down at the moment, but I think community engagement will be of even higher value afterwards.
Yeah.
And also the value of people's jobs.
Yeah.
That actually my job is a gift from God, but also it's a ministry to reach people, because when those things are under threat, we tend to then think, oh man, I'm missing that. So even working in a warehouse, people are going to say, I need to pastor this. I need to not just come and go. I need to actually engage with the people here. And I think community and people engagement will be a massive win out of this.
Excellent. Well, Mark, thank you for your time today, and it's been great to hear your thoughts on this, and I'm sure people are going to be really blessed by it.
Thanks very much, and I just hope that folks are doing well and keeping their spirits up during this time, knowing that God is not locked down. God isn't locked down. He's going to work really well.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark.